When were you drafted? I assume you were drafted?
Yeah, I was drafted in the summer of 1944. No, not 1944, 1943. Get back. I was drafted in 1942.
Whoa.
The war started in December of 1941, and I was drafted in the summer of 1942. I actually entered into the service in about, I don't remember the exact time, but September I think it was.
Yeah.
Went into basic training at Camp Robinson near Little Rock, Arkansas, and was in basic training for, I think, only about 6 weeks. And then I was sent to Florida and joined a landing craft training command, what they call landing craft training command. And it was a training unit that trained different divisions in landings, attack landings at different places. We were right on the Gulf of Mexico. Camp, it was called Camp Caravel when I first got there, and they changed the name to Camp Gordon Johnson. It's about, I'd say, 60 miles south of Tallahassee, Florida.
Okay.
And then let's see, we can start this place out.
How did you get from landing craft into engineers? How did that happen?
Oh, well, from when I guess everybody was trained on the different division. What they would do, they'd bring a division in at a time, an infantry division, and other types of people too, and train them in assaults on the beaches, landing craft. And then finally they were far enough along, this is my assumption, they were far enough along that they didn't need the training camp anymore, training outfit anymore to train those people. And so they were disbanded, and we were all separated. All of us in that unit were separated. It wasn't a big unit, probably about the size of a battalion or something like that.
Okay.
And they had all kinds of landing craft that they worked with, teaching them how to land. Then they disbanded them, and we were all separated, and I was sent to the 83rd Infantry Division, which was on okay, the 83rd was all maneuvers in Tennessee when I got there. When I got to the 83rd, I was assigned to the 308th Combat Engineer Battalion. And that was a combat engineers were attached to the 83rd Division, or part of the 83rd, I suppose. And it was from there that I went all the way through the war with the 308th until the war was over. It was time to come home, and then I was assigned to a unit that was on its way home, and they kind of split us up according to how long we'd been in and how many what they call points we'd earned, and I came home with them.
So you never really trained as an engineer? They just attached you onto that, and you just sort of.
Well, there were lots of engineers, combat engineers in it, and I was in battalion headquarters.
Okay.
And well, I didn't do any of the actual what engineers do. They did assaults across rivers, They built Bailey bridges. They built what did we call them back then? Those, I've even forgotten what we called them. Those floating bridges, pontoon type bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a lot of dynamiting and blowing up things. They carried flamethrowers with them. They used those a lot. And sometimes they did about everything the infantry did really, but they weren't as active in the front lines as the infantry, except on special occasions when they were called up for special duty of some kind. They were at front line, I'd say, but they weren't really riflemen or anything like the infantry was.
Yeah.
And when we landed in Normandy, they were really active because of the hedgerows there. The tanks and things like that couldn't move because of the hedgerows. They blew up a lot of that stuff. That dynamited a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
French had those planted. French planted those hedgerows to keep them out.
Then from Tennessee, after the maneuvers were over, we went to Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky, where we trained. And we trained there until March of 1944, I think it was March. And we went from there to Camp Shanks, New York, a port of embarkation, and landed in England in April.
So how long were you on the ship then?
We were about 2 weeks just crossing the oceans. They zigzagged across the ocean in a big convoy. And I remember I spent my birthday April 14th in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We landed in Liverpool and then we moved into Wales, really, in the western part of the island of Great Britain. And the little town that I can remember that was closest to where I was a place called Market Drayton. And then there was a bigger place there that was, and I cannot think of it right now, something under Lyme. But it was a center for where they made fine china and things like that. And I tried to get some china to send home to the mother, but they weren't making it. They were still making stuff, but it was for the army and it wasn't that fine stuff.
Yeah.
But you get some of this Spode and this other brands, I can't think what they are now, come from China and come from England, and it's very expensive stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the 6th of June 1944, when the invasion started, they moved a group from each battalion headquarters in the entire division. They moved them into the division headquarters just temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of that group. I was sent into division headquarters because they wanted some, in case there was a loss of an entire unit or anything like that, there would be somebody surviving over split up. We had, being from battalion headquarters too, we had a lot of records that we took with us. And on the 19th of June, we'd moved down to what was the name of that Southampton, England. And we boarded onto a landing craft infantry, they called it. The 83rd was kind of we weren't in on the initial invasion of Normandy, but we were back to wherever we were going to be needed, and we sailed on the 19th of June, and on the 19th of June there was a huge storm came up on the English Channel. And I later saw on television when they were talking, when Eisenhower was visiting over there around Omaha Beach where I landed, that he said that on that day there were more men lost because of drownings and all than had been in the initial invasion because of that storm and all. And he mentioned the 83rd that couldn't land. Most of it couldn't land because of the storm, but my ship did, my boat did, and I landed. And
When did you land?
it said that the invasion troops were about where the 83rd moved in. The 83rd had to sit out in the channel there for 2 or 3 days until that storm subsided. The rest of the divisions. And when we landed there, where we landed, they told us that the troops were about 4 miles ahead of us, around a town called Carentan. And we moved into Carentan, and it was just shot to pieces. I remember that.
Yeah.
And
Did you land in a landing craft, or did you land in
a landing craft. It was a. They have. You've seen a landing craft tank, LCT, I think it was called, which the front of a bigger boat, the front came down, opened up, and the tanks came out. Well, then there's the flat landing craft, the invasion, the little boats that are flat bottom. Well, all of these were flat bottom. As far as I guess they had something there, but they could go up on the beach. But this one that I was in, you didn't come out the front. It was a big enough boat that there was steps on each side, and you came down from the top and came down those steps. When we landed, they had moved in a bunch of rafts. I guess you call them rafts. Docks. They were floating docks, really huge things. And we landed right up against one of those docks, and the docks were just going up and down, high, jumping up and down. But we were able to come down those steps and get onto the dock, onto those docks, and they were just really rough. That storm was just tossing them there. I don't know how far out from in the channel they were, but they were 300 or 400 yards, I guess, or maybe more than that.
That's a long ways out.
Yeah. And then they had where you could drive a truck even out to those things, on those floating bridges, you'd call them. And but anyway, the docks were beginning to, when we landed, they were beginning to break apart, tear up. So but we got in, we walked in on one of those bridges, and then by the time we got to where we were going that night, well, it was dark, and we went in and landed, and went into that area and just laid down and went to sleep right there. It was in an area that was where there were hedgerows, and what we didn't know, it was dark, we couldn't see it. There was cannons in the right next to us on the next hedgerow. Boy, all of a sudden they started firing and we didn't know whether it was coming or going. We didn't even know they were there. I think I jumped about 10 miles into the air. But anyway, it was ours they were firing out. And then we moved on in, and about less than a week, because they had to wait for the rest of the division to land. It was as soon as the rest of the division landed, we went back to our own outfits and left the division headquarters, and we were glad to get away from them because there was a colonel there that was a flat idiot. He was trying to run those headquarters people like you'd be running a bunch of Boy Scouts instead of like soldiers. In fact, when we landed, he did not allow any of the division people to have ammunition at all. And of course we landed and none of the rest of the division landed, except maybe one or two other boats or something. And they were over there with, and if the Germans had known this, it was open like that, they could have gotten us in a hurry if they didn't know it. But
You
that's
couldn't
why.
have defended yourself.
But they didn't. Those division people didn't have any ammunition, and of course those of us that were shipped up there did. I had 3 or 4 bandoliers of ammunition, plus a belt of ammunition, and but we had to share ours with the division people because they didn't have any ammunition. That's how big a nut that colonel was. And
What kind of weapon were you carrying?
carrying an M1.
M1?
And all of us had either M1s or a little, I don't know, it was an M1 carbine, I guess, I don't know what you call it, what kind of, but most of us had M1s, and that was a wonderful gun.
I've heard they were pretty sweet.
They say that's the gun that won the war. It's what I have read some stories about it that won the war. And of course the new ones now, well, they're a lot more sophisticated than that was,
Yeah.
but they're very accurate.
Well, if I'd known where he was on June the 19th, that was our wedding anniversary. I was having mine,
I landed on France on our first wedding anniversary.
and I was having my appendix out, wasn't it?
Right along, man. You were in a hospital. I don't know whether it was that day or not. No, it wasn't that day.
Well, it was right there
Right
close.
after. So if we start in this
This is a
book,
sign of where we were heading, I guess. We've made it.
here's a book. This first picture on the first page, taken June 26, 1944 in Normandy. I can look at the picture now and I can see one, two, three, four. Some of them I don't know whatever happened to them. Four of them I know they came back to the United States, but they have died since then.
But you kept up with 2, haven't you?
Yeah,
You had more than that. Then
yeah, I kept up with several for a while, and then they
someone
just kind of.
died.
Let's see. Then there's a picture, of course, of the Dan France. There's a picture of
They sure don't get those pictures, do they? Why,
a
yes.
Bailey Bridge here that our outfit built, where this was near Dinam, D-I-N-A-N, and the 308th built that bridge. It's a Bailey Bridge, and it was said to be the highest Bailey Bridge built during the whole war.
You got a picture of that?
Yeah, that's right there in Normandy area.
Have you got a picture of that bridge?
Uh-huh.
Can you mark it?
Yeah, it's marked.
It's marked.
Yeah, it's marked.
It's marked, okay.
Now, you told me a story back when you just got off the beach about where they came in and borrowed a bulldozer and took it back to the beach.
Oh, yeah, there, we were in Normandy for, I guess, I've forgotten, well, I could tell from that schedule I had there in the book. But we were in Normandy for, the man is 15th of August. Probably left Normandy for Brittany about the 15th of August, 1944, it says. And so we were in Normandy during all that time, and there was combat. You saw all kinds of combat in that area, and there was also combat, towns that were blown to pieces, and farm homes that were blown to pieces. Normandy was just mostly mass destruction. And we lost the 83rd Division. Lost hundreds of people every day, and the replacements came in. It wasn't a matter of 3 or 4 being killed like they're talking about now in the present war, but there was one outfit I remember that they said that there was. Now, when I say we were lost, they weren't all killed. They were wounded and had to go back. They were taken out of combat and taken back to hospitals. But they lost so many, and there was devastation, dead cows. You didn't see dead Americans to speak of, because they were taken care of as soon as pretty much whenever. I saw dead Americans, I don't mean that, but Germans, they were buried in shallow graves. Well, Americans were too, but and marked, but the Americans were taken care of first. Mm-hmm. And when we moved to Brittany, we had our first rest period, which was for about a week. And first time I had a bath since we landed over there, and the bath was, of course, jumped into a creek and taking a bath. But during that first break, we had a armored bulldozer that was part of the equipment with the combat engineers, and they called for it, and the bulldozer operator took it. It was taken back to the burial area where they were burying American soldiers, and he came back and was telling me about how they took the dozers and just made mass grave, a long grave, and then they laid the soldiers one by one, and then covered them that way and wrapped them up in blankets or something. But he said that along the edge of that cemetery where they were doing that, they had them stacked, dead soldiers just stacked high, probably about a shoulder height. People were standing there, and they were burying them that way.
And this wasn't on the beach, though. This was,
yeah, no, not on the beach. This was back up into Normandy. And I suppose it was the same cemetery that's still there, where it now is a national cemetery. I suppose that's where they were buried. I think it was. There is a cemetery in Normandy, and I suppose that's where he was.
Yeah.
We went from there into Brittany, and Brittany was back towards Spain, and there were a lot of Germans. There were German that were back in their divisions of them, and we had to go back in there, and they had to clean all that out. Our division was assigned that duty first, and I don't remember now how long we were in Brittany, but it wasn't near the combat that they had in Normandy. I don't know whether there was any combat that was as fierce as it was in Normandy during the entire war there in Europe. I don't know whether it was or not. But anyway, after they got through in Brittany, they had the invasion of southern France. And so they moved us south towards, I think it was a lower river, but I'm not sure what that river name. I'd have to have a map now. Anyway, it was down in the area of Orleans, France, down that area. And we moved down there, and we were stretched so thin that they used to go up and down the river at night with different equipment that were mounted with guns and just fire across that river, making it look like there was a big force there. And they were invading at the same time from southern France. And what they were trying to do was squash them between the lower river, I guess the lower river or someplace, anyway, squash them in between those that were invading down there. And of course they were pinned between. And they had a huge surrender of Germans. And they surrendered all, they came forward up that way towards us, and they surrendered to the 83rd Infantry Division. So, and it made headlines over here, and the story was that we took more prisoners in that one surrender than there was taken in all of World War I. There were thousands
I
of
didn't see that over
taken.
here.
I think there's an article someplace about that, but I don't know whether it's in this book or not.
I wasn't getting the newspaper, I was too still.
But anyway, after that surrender, they had taken Paris. We went south, and some of them went on towards Paris, and they had taken Paris and gone on to the French border and towards Luxembourg. So we were, my particular group may have been, I don't know how much of the division went this way, but we boarded a train at Orleans, France. In Orleans, the railroad yards, by the way, there were big bomb holes all through it. But anyway, they had tracks. We boarded what they call a 40 and 8. That's from World War I. 40 horses, 40 men or 8 horses, I think they said. That's what they call those
40 and 8.
Yeah, that's what they call those railroad cars. We boarded those and started towards Luxembourg on the train. And we'd go so far, and the tracks would be out, and they'd back that old train up. I don't know, it took 3 or 4 days just to go from there over to Luxembourg. And Luxembourg was kind of a reprieve. We went into there, and